Hello and welcome back to another Let's Talk Racing video for the 2022-2023 jump season. Thanks in advance for all the fantastic feedback we've received from the first few videos, John.
Yeah, I know. Over 10,000 views on the first one. We've got an exciting episode with Paul Nicholls, who bids to retain his title, and now we've joined by none other than Dan Skelton, who's hoping to dethrone him.
It's going to be difficult, that.
It is. But I think
we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Doing it's a different matter.
Well, that's the thing. We wanted to talk to you about kind of strategy, how you plan. Is it ongoing? Is there a certain day where you put it all together? I suppose the end goal is to be champion trainer at some point in the near future. How are you thinking of going about beating Paul?
My feeling is what wins you a championship is consistency. And we're all trying to achieve that. You know, a season without ill health or a lack of form, as the media would describe it, would be great in any year, and that's what you're trying to do. I've never been champion trainer. I'd love to be champion trainer one day. I set out with the ambition every year to do so, but I don't let it block the reality of the day-to-day. It's very, very easy in modern day life to just move on too quickly. Nowadays, a lot of sports people, and I've got a lot of respect for the likes of Ben Stokes, who just said, this is too much. I need to step away from this and just take time to process what's going on in the day-to-day. You've got to try and remain present, because otherwise you just get wrapped up, and it can, at worst, it can end up meaning nothing, you know, or at best you go, that was great, let's go. The pain of defeat will last a lot longer than the joy of victory. You have to try and subdue that feeling in you, because it's natural, it's there, it rises up, and you have to push it back down and say, no, 6 horses got beat today, but I did have 2 graded winners, you know, so let's concentrate on those. And, you know, if you just went around thinking about the 6 losers, your team would very quickly lose inspiration, because they're thinking, well, hang on, we're trying our hardest, and actually we did do really well, but apparently that's not good enough. So doing the day-to-day is the most important thing. And then if that happens to be good enough to win a championship, well, fantastic.
I think you mentioned just off air before we came on that you've had 22 winners already this season, which is probably a little bit less than what you've had in previous years. Has it been nice this summer to almost sit back a little bit and to maybe assess going forward into the winter months?
Yeah, definitely. And last year we weren't so busy either in the summer. You know, I made a comment maybe 4 years ago to say that we're going to evolve in a slightly different direction and put so much more emphasis on the winter game and the quality of the horses that we're bringing in. And that takes some implementing, and I'm really proud of the team, you know, the whole team, from the people who buy the horses for us to the owners who ultimately part with the money to get them, and then the team that are preparing them. You know, everybody's embraced it and allowed it to happen. If one of those cogs resisted, you weren't ever going to get anywhere near where you wanted to. So actually the necessity for that harmonious multi-action has brought us to the point where actually that comment, or those comments up to 4 years ago, is coming more and more to fruition all the time. But everybody who works, their careers are like a set of tyres on a car. If you drive it fast, you'll wear them tyres out fast. If you take your time a bit, they're going to last longer. And when you're going hell for leather all summer, running horses left, right and centre, okay, you're having lots of winners and it means something, but you are putting miles on your clock. You're putting miles on your jockeys' clocks. The positivity we were getting out of the summer season had run its course.
Yeah.
The leg up it gave us, we had got the leg up as far as it could take us, really. And we had to make a decision then on how the business was going to go. Now, a few people watching this might go, sounds like Dan's very, you know, sort of off about summer racing, and, you know, is a bit derogatory, and that's a bit unfortunate, because by my own words, I'm saying that that's what made us. And it was, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world. But every business must evolve. Every business must pick its direction and work out what's best for it. And I feel, and the results will probably tell you, that we're in a better position because of that decision.
Do you think that was a straightforward decision then, as a result, with the general involvement of it, that you probably were going to have to take a hit winners-wise during the summer months? But how have you gone about, you were saying, all those cogs in the wheel to get to where you are now? I suppose take us through what that process may be like.
You have to be very clear in your vision of what you're doing, and you have to be very clear about putting that over to your supporters. And your supporters are your staff, your owners, your buyers, and ultimately the public, the press and the public, because, you don't want to just hang about. Dan Skelton had 100 runners last May. This year he's only got 20. What's going on? Yeah. You know what I mean? And the availability of information in the modern world with social media and everything else, if you didn't explain why you'd gone from 100 runners to 20, people might think something's going on. So, the necessity to explain the whole way, I think nowadays is heightened. Then you have to go and get the mandate to do it. You then have to, ensure that your supporters are going to see it the same way you do. And I was very lucky at the time, as it was a unanimous support. No one said, actually, no, we want to stick with how it is. Everybody in this game has a desire to go forward. If you're an owner, you want to win bigger races. If you're a jockey, you want to win bigger races. If you're a trainer, you want to win bigger races. It's quite an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to talk about because it's inevitable. Do you want to win a small trophy or do you want to win a big one? And by the way, there was a fair risk of it going wrong. If all of a sudden you say, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to, over the next 2 years, we're going to sort of lose 40% of our horse population. If that 40% disappeared but never rematerialised as a better horse or even as a similar horse, you've done yourself out of 40% worth of business. So there was risks attached to it, but you go through the due processes of making sure that everyone's going to support it. And the rest, as they say, is history. But you can't change your mind. There's no point getting to next season and seeing that Fergal O'Brien beating you by 30 winners and 300 grand and going, I made the wrong call. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can't do that. You've got to go, that's what they're doing. That's their plan. That's how they're doing. No point going, well, I used to be in that position. You are now in the position you're in. So you have to be happy in your own skin doing it.
And going back to the championship and gaining advantage on other trainers that are competing at the top, you've recently started the stud project here. Does that excite you a lot? And how far down the process with that are you?
There's varying stages to that because we started buying foals more or less when I started training. Dad bought a lot of foals. He had, I think, the first really good one was a horse called Rascal, who won 4 on the bounce. And then there's been Tommy Rapper and a few others that have achieved plenty without perhaps being stars yet. But I feel like the best ones are still to come, even from the buying as foals. Then we took a few brood mares and we sort of bred to outside stallions, obviously. And then when it got to the point where, we have enough mares now to consider standing a stallion, we felt the Dink was the obvious option for a number of different reasons, not least the new Vinegra link. Yeah. But I believe, and I think you guys would probably echo it, there's X number of trainers who you would trust to get your horses fit. If you guys were owners, I should imagine there is a number of trainers you would trust to get those horses fit and place them correctly and everything else. Why is there a ranking system in those trainers? Well, of course, not everyone is equal. We know that Willie Mullins at the moment is miles ahead of everybody. It does come down to a lot of horsepower. The hardest thing in the job, I believe, is getting the horses. Yeah. Like I've touched on, we can all get them fit. We can all put them in the right races. I mean, if you've got the best 2-mile novice hurdler, it's hardly rocket science. You go there, end up at the Supreme. If there's a bit left in the tank, go to Aintree or Punchestown. Yeah. It's not a difficult... Getting the horse is harder than actually doing that with the horse. Once you get the horse,
the calendar writes itself.
Exactly,
really,
you know how to do it. And what's more, with the growing and strengthening of the boutique sales and how much money those winning point-to-pointers and top form horses cost, I just don't see it as a playing field where we're guaranteed to be the biggest buyer in that field. Okay, we certainly get our fair share of them. I'm not saying that I'm hard done by any stretch, because I'm not. But we can't buy them all. As a trainer, you've got to end up with a certain number of horses. If you've created a hotel with 100 rooms and you are consistently only filling 60, you might as well have a 60-room hotel. I've got a number here that we have to try and sustain for financial reasons, staff reasons, and everything else. We have to get those number of horses, and we want to keep the quality as high as possible. But if we're breeding a few, and we're not necessarily just using our own stallion, we're using lots of other stallions. You'd be a fool not to use the likes of Walk in the Park and the Maxioses and other horses coming through at the moment. I think this year we've foaled 40 horses, of which 30 have stayed on the stud. Of those 30, or access to 40, you'd like to hope that 10 of them are going to make it into the system for you. So that's 10 we actually don't have to go and find or buy or whatever. And if you're breeding a horse, of course, the great saying is you get what you breed, you buy what you want. So if that foal comes out like this, that's your foal. You can't say, actually, I prefer a different one. Yeah. So there are going to be times when, breeding is not straightforward, but that's a story that's age old. But what it does do is it allows owners or breeders, or in this case, owner breeders, to create a horse at unit cost rather than market cost.
Yeah.
So if you have a grade 2 winning mare that may be £100,000 worth of brood mare, you send it to a Walk in the Park, that mare might have 5 foals for her life. You take the 100 divided by 5, so she's a 20 grand carrying vessel, if you like, with a X whatever the fee costs. Your unit cost by the time you get it,
it's an expensive business.
It is, but it's how much is a Walk in the Park, a 16-3 Walk in the Park 3-year-old out of a grade 2 winning mare at the Derby sale?
250 grand.
So your unit cost is actually 70. Yeah. So the market value is 200 or something, but the unit cost is 70. So a lot of the owners can actually get access or potentially get access to that horse for a unit cost rather than a market cost. Now, of course, there's going to be the ones that you get that aren't perfect and they have to be factored in. But I believe, just like if you're a trainer, if you're a breeder, if you do it for a lifetime, you'll get your results. And that's an important thing. And to be honest with you, so many people in racing are in it for a lifetime. They're not in it for 5 minutes. A lot of people, unfortunately, the first horse they buy might be a terrible horse that they have no luck with, doesn't want to try and can't breathe. They might get put off and never have another horse. But if you actually have a horse that does well for you, perhaps wins 1 race or 2, you go to some nice race courses, you get a good experience. Because it's a competitive environment, it's very easy to get hooked.
I suppose with that analogy, when you've got maybe a football team and you see a young player come through the system and they always are a little bit more, I suppose, connected to the fans. For you personally, with the horses that you're breeding, is there that extra added sentimental value when these horses are doing well?
We've yet to really run many. We've run a few, and I've remained professional with it, to be honest with you.
Is it easy to get kind of carried away with them because you have seen them from
I think it's
day
easy
one?
To get carried away with any horse.
Yeah.
Take a horse like Virgilio, for instance. Virgilio wouldn't be the best known horse in racing, but you guys that follow it, you'd know who I'm talking about. He wore his heart on his sleeve. Every time he went out, he tried his hardest. It's impossible not to get attached to a horse like that. It's impossible not to get attached to a Roxana. You do. You may try to stay as professional as possible, but you do. So I think you've got to remember that that it's a results-driven business ultimately, and those horses are players on a team. There's no point getting carried away with your youth team and giving them the full support because they've been there, they signed schoolboy forms, if they're unfortunately not good enough.
Yeah. The main thing that we talk about on the podcast is young horses and exciting young horses. And you talk about the really young ones that you can't get carried away with. There will be some that are potentially bursting onto the scene this year. Are there a couple of names that potentially are exciting that the viewers would maybe listen out for?
Yeah, there's always some. I mean, I think we all probably get it wrong 50% of the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure when you speak to Paul, it'll be, there's a fantastic unraced 11s first.
Oh, he said a few of them.
Yeah.
You've got to remember they're all unbeaten.
Yeah.
I would struggle to sort of pick I'd struggle to pick a few out. I mean, I think of our novice hurdlers this year. One you'd have known from last year is Dethroning. He won two bumpers, and I think he's going to be, and hopefully will be, a good hurdler and an even better chaser. There's a new horse coming from France called L'Eau de Sud, who no one will have heard of, but he looks as good as you could get at home. He's got to go and do it, obviously. I think we're very, very strong in the mares novice hurdling department this year, and we were last year and the year before, which is great. And I think that's really important, because that mares program is just ever growing.
And you think the likes of Nurse Susan?
I think there's a lot to come from her.
Yeah.
There's a mare that you going into the novice chasers. Then there's a mare that you will have watched, but not necessarily think she's going to go as far as I do. But Galia de la Toe, I think when she goes chasing as a mare, she's going to be the business. Unexpected Party goes chasing. He's going to be really excited. Ballygriffin Cottage.
Lac de Constance.
Yeah.
Particularly excited about him, I am.
Very. And like Lac de Constance is a horse there that he's always had it. Do you know what I mean? He's always had it. And I have to say, fair play to his owner, Andrew Cohen. He's always been like, it's time, there's time. And whenever there's been any doubt with any horse, we always kind of take that on board. And a very famous football trainer once told me, if there's any doubt, there's no doubt. And we have really, that's hard. That's a hard thing to stick to when you're 3-1 on in a novice hurdle, but the ground's not quite perfect. You have to remember that you only get that chance to make that call once. And some trainers, I'm not going to mention names, but some trainers who make that decision, that hard decision to actually wait for another day and get a bit of public stick for waiting for another day, I think people have to remember that you only get one chance to make that call, but you have to live with the consequences of it forever. Lac de Constance is a very good example of not necessarily taking the route out, but recognising that the route to not run is very much there. It's not a failing to take the option not to run. So we protected him very much, and I'll do the same again this year.
Will he go novice chasing?
He will. No doubt he'll end up going into a higher grade this year. He'll have to. But what I'm not going to do is all of a sudden turn up at Newbury first time and go on then. And then, okay, you've done that, now we're going for the Felton.
You almost sacrifice the back end of the year as well, if going really hard early.
For sure. And nowadays, it takes so much out of horses. Each race takes so much out of a horse, especially the higher up you go, the harder it is. And you've got to remember that. Even those horses that look like they aren't getting a hard race, if they're doing it at a high level, they are.
I've got to ask you, there's a few rumours floating around that there's a particularly exciting horse, and I'm not even sure if he's real. Mr. Hope Street?
Oh, Mr. Hope Street.
Particularly exciting.
Look, he's a young horse with...
So he's real?
He's real.
He's real, yeah. Cool.
He's real, he exists. We like him. I'm not going to put any more pressure on him than that. He's a nice horse. He's unraced, 4-year-old, by Jetaway. Beautiful animal.
Yeah.
Goes nicely at home. Doesn't necessarily go the best of them. Certainly doesn't go the slowest of them. He's got a chance.
Are those the horses at this stage of the season when you're going into the autumn that those youngsters that do stick out at home, they're the ones that really excite you? Like, if you can't be excited now, then you never will be.
You never will be. Yeah. I have learnt though, you have to just...
you're very keen on flaying it down. I think Paul...
If you'd have asked me 6-7 years ago, that would have been like, but you've got to, they're animals. They're going to go and produce what they can produce. And each horse has a preordained amount of talent, and it's up to us to get that talent out. Getting it out at the appropriate times is the most important thing. You can't go and ask a horse for the maximum it can give as a 4-year-old if it's going to be a 6-year-old chaser. Some of them do it because they have bundles of ability. Great Orlean had no right winning 2 bumpers last year. Great big green horse by Fleming's Firth, no right winning those bumpers. But he won them because he's just very, very good. Some horses win bumpers because they're very well prepared or they're sharper than the others on the day. But being a trainer, it's about getting the best out of the horse at the most appropriate time. And those horses that show a lot as 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds, they don't know any better. Like, they give you what you ask for. If you ask for loads, they'll give you as much as they've got. They're genuine. They're a flight animal. They can't lie. Do you know what I mean? They can't lie to you. Obviously, it's a very different thing doing it over 5-6 furlongs at home to go and doing 2 miles on the track. And
some must stand out compared to others at home.
Oh yeah, I won't tell you his name, but the best horse I ever had at home was absolutely stone cold useless.
Yeah,
and I mean stone cold useless, to the point where it could ruin everything for you. It could be that the system could be that wrong, and like when that happens, that there's nothing more deflating than that, and that's why it's very important to say they do everything right. But the track is where they will tell you. You know, they will tell you at the track how good they are.
And we'd say a Grey Dawning then, who perhaps you were maybe going into bumpers last year not with great expectations. When those horses can transfer onto the track, that must be a kind of an added bonus, and really the ones you want that aren't maybe telling you too much at home but can bring it when they need to most.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
You've got to remember your gallop's only 6 furlongs long. All right. Now doing 3 sets of 6 equals 18, which is 2 mile 2, but you're doing it with a break. If you put that gallop 2 miles long, and the horses that win over 6 furlongs or go best over 6 furlongs, you don't know what they're going to do if that gallop's 2 miles long.
Never been tempted to put one in. Race course at home.
We've got a grass gallop that we use, but if you were asking them for that effort and putting them into the red zone that regularly, you'd never have a horse. You know, it'd be everything to be left at home. The best horses are the ones that you get to 3 furlongs out and we've got more.
I did want to ask about my Drogo, who was one of the most exciting horses in training. Is he well? Because we didn't see him at the back end of last year.
Yeah, no, you probably won't see him until the spring. Just really frustrating. We scanned his tendon and he had the beginnings of a lesion in a standard leg. You know, we call it a leg in the industry. You've all heard that. It's just very, very frustrating. He will be fine. We'll have to be patient. We scanned him probably 3 weeks ago and it's all but filled in. I mean, there's the tiniest bit of irregularity on the scan, which shows still a few fibres of healing. He's on the walker and he will get rescanned probably in month, 6 weeks time. We'll do lots and lots of road work with him. And then we'll see where we get to. But Richard and Lizzie, who bred him and own him, like they are 100% behind doing the best thing. You know what I mean? There's going to be no, come on, let's just take a chance here. He will get the most time he needs and everything else. And each horse has a maximum they can give once in their life. And the very best ones can maintain a very high standard. But of all of those, one will be better than the other. We need to remember that with any good horse, but especially one that's had an injury. You've got to remember that if your build-up isn't perfect and everything doesn't come together perfectly, you probably won't get the best result. So we've got to be mindful that there is the year after. And if the reality is that the year after will probably be smoother, that's probably when your peak is going to come. So you have to sort of remember that and plan for that.
And I suppose with the horse still being very young as well, that when you go novice chasing at that young age, you probably do have that luxury that you can take as much time as possible. And you mentioned also now with a couple of owners, them being patient. How important is that for you that your owners understand that sometimes it is going to take the extra year? It might be another 2 seasons before we see my Drogo or a horse of that nature at their best.
We're in a good position now. Harry's been champion jockey. Our opinion carries some clout. Do you know what I mean? It's not just an opinion. It has some sort of grounding to it. So I think now when I say something or when I offer an opinion or a plan, there's a bit of illustration behind it as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's so important. There's times when you go there thinking, we're indestructible, and you get beat. So if you go in there thinking, we're destructible, you're definitely going to get beat. Yeah. So getting that over to the owners and the supporters is really important. And ultimately, when 2 or 3 great horses clash, there can only be one winner. Not that you should get credit, that you're going to get credit for being second, trying to sort of build all of this up and have, don't run yet and do run now and everything else. And this is the best horse I've ever had and everything else. It goes to the races and finishes second, but got beat by Constitution Hill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You might think, how did this happen? Everything was perfect. I'm afraid it was Constitution Hill. The hardest place in racing is just this much below top level, because you're a really, really good horse, but you don't win every time. And unfortunately, there might be one getting more accolades than yours. So it's a really hard position to be in, just below that top level. And that, I think, is where you need to be most robust.
Well, a massive thank you for coming on the podcast. One thing I've learned today is the whole Skelton team is moving in one direction. And but thank you very much for speaking to us, and best of luck for the season.
Cheers, thank you.
And if you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you soon.